My name is Lenora Whitlock, and at 65, I had spent most of my life building a career I was proud of. Today, though, the pride didn't come quietly. It rattled through me like electricity as I stepped out of the sleek Denver office tower, clutching the contract that had taken decades of late nights, endless client meetings, and relentless determination to secure $10 million. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the thrill of finally seeing it all pay off. The sun was dipping behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the streets gold as I slid into my car. The city hummed around me, bustling, impatient, alive, but inside, I was vibrating with anticipation. I imagined the look on Daniel's face, my son, now 40, and so confident in his own life when he saw the papers. And Olivia, 38, poised and polished as ever would have to acknowledge that the deal wasn't just mine. It was a lifetime of work. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling a knot of nervous excitement. I rehearsed my words the way I would announce it. A calm smile, a measured tone pride laced with humor. I did it, I would say. The words already danced on my tongue, bright and victorious. As I pulled into the quiet suburban street, the familiar curve of our driveway came into view, and with it, the sense of home. My chest swelled with anticipation as I thought of walking through that front door and sharing my triumph. I had earned this moment, earned their attention, earned a glimpse of acknowledgement from the people who mattered most, or at least who I thought mattered. Stepping out of the car, I took a deep breath. The crisp evening air filled my lungs, carrying both pride and the faintest whisper of unease. Behind that door, everything could change in an instant. The front door clicked behind me, and the warmth of home should have been comforting. Instead, I felt an icy tension as I stepped into the kitchen. Olivia was already there, arms crossed, her sharp gaze tracking my every move. Daniel sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, oblivious or pretending to be. "I see you're home early," Olivia said, her voice deceptively calm, but I caught the edge in it. I held up the contract, letting the thick paper rustle between my fingers. "I did it?" I said, my voice shaking with excitement and nerves. $10 million for the consulting deal. All our hard work paid off. Her lips twisted not into a smile, but something colder, tighter. "Your deal," she snapped. "You mean the one I've been coordinating meetings for, the one I made sure the client stayed on track." Her eyes flashed, and for a moment, I thought I misheard her. "It's my work, Olivia," I said carefully. "I built the strategy, the proposal, everything. You helped, yes. But this is mine." Her posture shifted, a warning I should have heeded. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" she hissed, stepping closer. I backed up instinctively, but the kitchen was small, every corner, a barrier. Daniel looked up briefly, frowning but didn't intervene. My heart raced, a knot of fear tightening in my chest. "This isn't about you," I said, raising my hands, trying to diffuse the tension. Her eyes narrowed, and before I could respond, she lunged. Hands on my shoulders, she shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, catching nothing. My heel slipped against the tile, my body tipping, and then the world spun. Pain exploded as I hit the stairs, each step a jolt through my arms, legs, and head. The last thing I registered before the darkness swallowed me was Olivia's voice, cold and triumphant. Daniel called out my name, but his words sounded distant, muted. The bright kitchen lights blurred into streaks of white, and then there was nothing but silence. When I thought of home afterward, it was no longer the place of comfort I remembered. It was the scene of betrayal, a place where trust shattered with a single shove. The echo of my fall lingered in my bones, a painful reminder that the people I loved most could also be the ones who hurt me the most. The beeping of monitors was the first sound that reached me as I slowly opened my eyes. Light filtered through the blinds, sharp and unforgiving, making me wince My head throbbed my leg, a dull, constant ache, but the worst pain came from the emptiness around me. The hospital room was quiet except for the measured steps of the nurses moving like ghosts. A young nurse approached clipboard in hand, her expression both gentle and guarded. "You're awake," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" I tried to speak, my throat dry and raw. "How long?" I croaked. 2 weeks, she replied. 2 weeks in a coma. My stomach twisted. 2 weeks had passed, and no one had been here. My heart sank before I could even finish the thought. My family, Daniel, Olivia, I asked, my voice trembling. The nurse hesitated, eyes flicking away. "No one has visited," she said finally. "Your son called once early on. Your daughter-in-law hasn't been here at all." The words landed like stones. My mind spun. How could they leave me? How could they let me lie here, helpless, while I fought to survive? I tried to sit up, the pain shooting through my body like fire, and the nurse quickly pressed a hand to my shoulder. "Take it easy. You need time to heal." But my thoughts refused to slow. I kept picturing the contract, the culmination of decades of work. And now the person I trusted to celebrate with seemed absent, indifferent. Days dragged on in a haze of medication, half-sleep, and the relentless hum of machines. I glanced toward the door, constantly hoping for a sign that someone I loved would step through it, that someone would care. But the hallway remained empty. Nurses came and went, carrying out routines. But there was no warmth, no acknowledgement of the fear and betrayal embedded in my soul. I realized then that the house I had imagined as a place of comfort, where I would share my triumphs, had been replaced by a hospital room that felt like a cage. And in that cage, abandoned and weak, I confronted a bitter truth. The people I loved most could walk away at the exact moment I needed them the most. It was a late afternoon when Margaret, my oldest friend and confidant, slipped quietly into my hospital room. At 60, she carried herself with the calm authority I had always relied on, but today her eyes were sharp, almost hard. She sat beside my bed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Lenora," she began, her voice low, "you need to know what's really happening with Olivia." My chest tightened. I had feared this moment, dreaded the truth, but I nodded, urging her to continue. "She's not just ignoring you," Margaret said. "She's actively trying to take over your consulting contract. I've been looking into some of the emails and company memos. There's evidence she's manipulating the documents and even transferring funds under the pretense of expenses for your projects." My heart lurched. I had trusted her, believed that her presence in the company was merely supportive, perhaps even helpful. The thought that she was orchestrating a plan to steal what I had built right under my nose made the room feel smaller, tighter. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice further. "I've seen drafts of the documents she altered. Your name removed. Her signature inserted. She's trying to rewrite history. Make it seem like the success you worked for was hers all along." Anger surged through me, sharp and hot, mixing with the lingering ache from the fall. My fingers curled around the bedsheet, as if it could anchor me against the storm of betrayal. "I can help you," Margaret said, "but we have to act carefully. Collect everything, emails, memos, anything, and we need legal guidance before you confront her." I nodded, my mind already racing. The betrayal I had endured alone in that hospital bed had now extended into the very work I had devoted my life to. But beneath the shock and rising fury, a spark of determination ignited. I would not let her erase me. Not my life, not my legacy. By the time I returned home from the hospital, the first task was clear. I needed evidence. My body was still fragile, but my mind had never felt sharper. Margaret was waiting in the living room, stacks of folders and a laptop spread across the coffee table. "Start with the emails," she said. "Every message between Olivia and your colleagues, every approval she forged, track it all." I nodded, my hands trembling, with a mix of anger and determination. Each message I scrolled through tightened the knot in my chest. There it was, subtle language that rewrote meetings, misattributed accomplishments, instructions sent under my name that I never wrote. Next came the bank statements. My lawyer, Michael, a steady man in his 40s, joined us mid-afternoon. His calm demeanor balanced the storm raging inside me. "We need to document every transaction linked to her," he said, tapping a pen against his pad. Together, we traced transfers labeled as project expenses, all funneling into accounts I didn't recognize. The hospital records were next. The nurse liaison had agreed to meet us privately, and her testimony confirmed my suspicions. Sedation records were altered, notes exaggerated, making it appear that I had been incapacitated far longer than I actually was. Someone had been rewriting my reality, even while I was awake and fighting to survive. Hours passed, but for the first time since the fall, I felt a measure of control returning. Each piece of proof was a brick in a wall I was building between me and the betrayal I'd endured. My hands ached, my head throbbed, but I was no longer a passive victim. Margaret leaned back, her eyes steady on mine. "This is enough to start," she said. "We can take the next step." I drew in a deep breath, feeling both the weight of the evidence and the power it gave me. Finally, I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing to fight. The apartment felt unusually quiet as I sat at the dining table, files spread before me. Each document, email, and bank statement was a thread in the web Olivia had tried to spin around my life. Margaret perched on the edge of the couch, watching me work, her presence a steady reassurance. Michael, my lawyer, joined via video call, his voice calm but firm. "Lenora, the next step is strategic. Record conversations, gather witness statements, and prepare to confront them with undeniable proof. Timing is crucial." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of nervous anticipation and rising confidence. For the first time since the fall, I sensed that the power could shift back to me. I arranged my files by type, highlighting the forged approvals, altered emails, and suspicious transfers. Later that evening, I carefully set up my phone to record a call with Olivia. Every word she said would now be captured evidence I could use. My hands shook, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of control returning to me. As I closed the folder for the night, I realized that this meticulous planning, this quiet preparation, was the first true step toward justice. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was ready to fight. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old leather, a quiet tension hanging in the air. I stepped through the doors, Lenora Whitlock, 65, still fragile from my fall, but determined. Margaret sat near the front, her presence a silent anchor, while Michael, my lawyer, handed me a folder of evidence one last time. Across the room, Olivia and Daniel were seated together. Olivia's confident posture wavered slightly as our eyes met. Daniel avoided looking directly at me, his face pale, the weight of his inaction and complicity evident. Michael began presenting the case. First came the recordings. Olivia's own voice admitting to taking over my consulting contract and rewriting approvals as if the work was hers. Gasps rippled through the gallery. I held my breath as he played snippets of emails and internal memos showing the systematic alteration of my documents. Every forged signature, every misdirected fund laid bare before the judge and my family. The hospital records followed. Dr. Price, mid-50s, calm but authoritative, explained the altered sedation logs, exaggerating the severity of my coma to make me appear incapacitated. Her testimony revealed a deliberate plan to undermine my credibility and steal my livelihood. Olivia squirmed, her smirk fading, while Daniel's shoulders slumped under the weight of exposure. Michael then introduced the financial evidence transfers made under falsified pretexts, emails directing colleagues to act on Olivia's instructions. Each piece, stacked, forming a clear narrative of calculated betrayal. I felt a surge of vindication as the judge leaned forward, reading every detail with meticulous attention. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I described the fall, the coma, the abandonment, and the systematic attempts to erase my achievements. My voice was steady, firm, unshaken by the memory of pain. I wasn't pleading. I was declaring truth. The courtroom was silent, the gravity of my words settling over everyone, including the people who had tried to destroy me. As Michael closed the presentation, I caught Olivia's hollow gaze and Daniel's averted eyes. The balance had shifted. The truth, undeniable and complete, stood fully on my side, and for the first time I felt the weight of justice begin to lift from my shoulders. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom, punctuating the tense silence. I sat upright, Lenora Whitlock, 65, feeling the adrenaline still hum in my veins. My hands rested lightly on the folder of evidence, though the weight of what it represented had already shifted the balance of power. The evidence presented before this court is overwhelming, the judge began, her voice firm yet measured. It is clear that the defendant orchestrated a calculated scheme to defraud Ms. Whitlock of her intellectual property and financial rights. Olivia's face drained of color, her carefully constructed confidence crumbling. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands clenched in his lap, unable to hide the shame that had replaced the casual indifference he once wore. The judge continued detailing the restitution awarded and the penalties imposed. Olivia would face prison for her fraud and conspiracy. Daniel, though spared incarceration, was held accountable for his complicity. Their private smirks, which had once haunted me, were replaced by visible discomfort and disbelief. I exhaled slowly, a relief I hadn't realized I was holding washing through me. Years of fear, betrayal, and sleepless nights felt momentarily lighter. Justice finally had a tangible presence, and I could see its effect in the stunned faces of the people who had wronged me. Outside the courtroom, Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting pride and relief. Michael's calm nod confirmed what I already felt: the fight, the meticulous preparation, the hours spent gathering proof. It had all been worth it. Even as the courtroom emptied, I remained seated for a moment, taking in the reality that I had reclaimed not only my contract, but my agency. Daniel avoided my gaze as we passed, and Olivia's steps were hurried, unsteady. Their reactions, though subtle, spoke volumes. The scales had tipped, and I had been heard. For the first time since the fall, I felt a genuine sense of closure. The betrayal that had weighed so heavily on my heart was met with consequence. The path ahead was mine to navigate, guided by the knowledge that I had fought and won on my own terms. The sunlight in my new apartment spilled across the hardwood floors, warm and promising. I ran my fingers along the edge of my desk, feeling the familiar smoothness of polished wood, and for the first time in months, a sense of calm settled over me. The chaos, the betrayal, and the legal battles were behind me, or at least I had survived them. I had reclaimed control over my consulting contract, my finances, and my decisions. The office staff had welcomed me back, with Margaret coordinating smoothly alongside me. Emails once manipulated by Olivia now bore my unmistakable approval. Each signature I stamped on documents felt like a small reclaiming of authority, a reminder that no one could erase the work I had built over decades. In the mornings, I returned to a routine that had been long absent. A quiet coffee on the balcony, reading the Denver news, feeling the city awaken below me. The hours were my own, and I filled them with projects that mattered both professionally and personally. I even made time for phone calls to friends I had neglected, bridging gaps widened by years of sacrifice and distraction. Daniel reached out hesitantly, a mixture of guilt and curiosity in his voice. I kept the conversation measured, boundaries clear. Olivia predictably had disappeared from my sphere entirely. The relief of having distance from their toxicity was immense, but the awareness of what I had endured lingered like a shadow, reminding me of my resilience. I also began investing in causes I cared about. A portion of the restitution was funneled into a small foundation to help professionals facing workplace sabotage and abuse. Each contribution, each email from someone thanking me, reminded me that my struggle could become something meaningful beyond my own recovery. By the end of the day, I would sink into my armchair with a sense of quiet pride. The contract, the legal victory, and the independence I had fought to reclaim were not just tangible outcomes. They were symbols of endurance, of self-reliance, and of a life I would shape on my terms. Even as I closed the laptop and watched the sun dip behind the Rockies, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years, a profound confidence that I was enough, that my life was finally mine. The evening light filtered through my apartment windows, casting a golden glow over the small collection of framed photographs I had unpacked. Faces of friends, colleagues, and moments of achievement smiled back at me. I traced my fingers along the edges of a photo showing the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the foundation. I had established a modest project, but one that carried profound meaning. I thought of the years spent chasing approval, the decades of loyalty to family, who had turned their backs when I needed them most. That loyalty had been a weight, and yet it had also honed my endurance, my patience, and my ability to stand firm in the face of betrayal. Every late night, coding my consulting proposals, every painstaking meeting had built more than a career. It had built resilience. The foundation's first grant letters had already gone out, offering support to professionals facing workplace sabotage and toxic family dynamics. Each thank you note reminded me that my struggles could transform into hope for someone else. The thought made my chest swell, a sense of purpose, replacing the lingering ache of old wounds. I poured a cup of tea and settled into my armchair, watching the Denver skyline twinkle as the city shifted from day to night. For the first time in years, I felt an unshakable sense of autonomy. The legal battles, the betrayal, the abandonment, they no longer defined me. My life was mine to shape, guided by the wisdom and strength I had earned. As I closed my eyes, I allowed myself a quiet smile. Freedom wasn't just the absence of those who had hurt me. It was the presence of a life lived on my own terms. The lessons were hard, but they were mine, and they had forged a version of me capable of standing taller than ever before.